Okay, in this video, we're going to be talking about the age of Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria's age is characterized by, of course, the maximum of the British Empire. One-fourth of the lands in the world were ruled by Queen Victoria and her husband, Prince Albert, who happened to die quite young. And so Queen Victoria spent the last 30 years of her life mourning for the loss of her husband. Let's say something about Prince Albert. Prince Albert was proud of the British Empire, so he had a huge building built, the famous Crystal Palace, which is famous even in the history of architecture, because it was the first time that a building was made of glass, of steel, of wood. Because he wanted it to be crystal clear. He wanted it to be somehow open even from the outside. And what happened in the Crystal Palace? A great exhibition, a huge exhibition was held in 1851, the famous Great Exhibition, where people could see products coming from the colonies. So it was just a way of giving British people a gist, somehow a taste of these colonies: India, Australia, South Africa, and so on. So taking a look at the raw materials, at the food, at the new stuff coming from these colonies, people could become proud of how huge the British Empire had become. Queen Victoria herself was so proud that she named herself Empress of India. So she was the Queen of England and the Empress of India. And even the biggest jewel in her crown came from India, the famous Koh-i-Noor. It's a famous, I think it's a diamond, the biggest jewel in her crown, which is still in Britain, even though India wants it back. But they are still waiting for it to go back to India. But I don't think they will never see it again. Anyway, in the Great Exhibition, people also could admire how far the scientific and technological achievements had gone, because don't forget that the Industrial Revolution had started in England 1 century before, in around 1750. And from that moment on, huge new goals had been reached, which were exhibited in the Great Exhibition that Prince Albert organized and held in the Crystal Palace. It got destroyed in a fire because it was, it was something new, because no one had ever used steel and glass to build a building. But it got destroyed, probably just because it was made of that kind of materials. Another one was built outside London, but it got destroyed as well. And now all we get is just a football team named Crystal Palace. This is what we have of the famous Crystal Palace. What else can we say about Queen Victoria? She wanted some gist of India in England, and so the famous Royal Pavilion was built near Brighton. It has somehow an Indian taste. You can Google Royal Pavilion to have a look at how strange this building is. It's a typical Indian religious building, but it has nothing to do with the outskirts, because we are in the middle of England, of Sussex. And how come you find such a weird building over there? It's a way of making English people closer to the reality of India. But the question is, was imperialism something to be proud about? Could British people really be proud of what they were doing in India, in Africa, British people and Western people in general? Well, the answer might be no, and this is what Joseph Conrad said. Joseph Conrad was not British. He was born in the Polish Ukraine, so the kind of imperialism he knew pretty well was the Russian imperialism. He moved to France. He had a dream. He wanted to become a sailor. So he first went to France and he learned how to become a sailor. Then to England, and he became a British citizen. From England, he embarked on a steamboat to Africa. Actually, he went to Congo, which takes its name from a river, the River Congo, which Conrad himself reached. His adventures in Africa, in the heart of Black Africa, gave him the material to write a novel, Heart of Darkness. Heart of Darkness is based on Conrad's experience in Africa. The protagonist is Charlie Marlowe, a young man who probably, just like Conrad did, wanted to move away from England, because moving away from England could mean becoming successful and gaining a career. There was a British Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli, who used to say that the East is a career. So if you want to make yourself a career, you need to go to exile. Kipling would say in White Man's Burden, going to exile to Eastern lands, which might also be dangerous. But if you somehow go through that danger, you truly become someone. So, convinced by his aunt, Charlie Marlowe embarks from the River Thames. So the story starts on the River Thames and takes us to the River Congo. So from one river to another, from Europe to Africa, from the heart of Western imperialism, that is England, because the British Empire was the greatest empire which existed at that time. We are taken to the heart of Black Africa, to Congo. Why to Congo? Because Marlowe had a mission. He had to go and check what is going on in Congo, because in Congo there's an agent named Kurtz who works for this company which trades in ivory, and she's the best ivory trader. No one has ever understood how Kurtz might have been so successful in sending so much ivory from Africa to Europe, but nobody has heard from him for a long time. So the problem is, what's wrong with Kurtz? Charlie Marlowe's task is going to Congo, looking for him and taking him back home. He reaches Congo after a long journey. During this journey, he starts learning about what kind of man Kurz is, and he is more and more fascinated by Kurz's personality, because this man, who has a German name, Kurz, but happens to have an English and French father and mother. So basically, he represents Europe. And he truly represents Europe, even because he is so well educated. He is a poet. He writes poems. He is a philosopher. He can write and speak about any topic, about love, about life, about death, about the human condition. He becomes an idol for Charlie Marlowe, even before he truly meets him. And he is already an idol for the tribes, for the Congolese tribes who worship him like a god. Um, one one thing is important. During his journey, Charlie Marlowe happens to find a picture depicting a blind old woman carrying a lamp, and this lamp is somehow enlightening a man naked on the floor. What does this mean? Who is this blind old woman? It's Europe. Europe is an old woman because Europe is the ancient continent, the old continent, but it is old and in a way corrupt. Old, it is aging. Europe is aging. Europe is no longer fit somehow. So, and Europe is blind. Europe has been made blind by this terrible thing that is imperialism, because imperialism is about acts of aggression. There's no way you can justify imperialism, and Joseph Conrad does not want to make an apology of imperialism. This is what Kipling does. Kipling makes an apology of imperialism by saying that it's a way of bringing civilization to, we may say, minor, inferior peoples, not people, peoples, all around the world. But Conrad does not make an apology. He makes an indictment. He accuses imperialism of violence, of oppression, of aggression. And even at the very beginning of this short novel, before Charlie Marlowe and the rest of the crew embark to reach Congo, they talk about their mission. And Charlie Marlowe says, look, we are gonna do what ancient Romans used to do 2,000 years ago. We are doing the same thing that Romans did, that is civilizing people in a way that is true for Romans, because it is undoubtedly true that Romans often brought advantages to the peoples that they dominated. What we need to observe is that modern imperialism is not like that. And Conrad depicts it as the horror. The horror are Kurz's last words before dying, because when Marlowe meets him and he informs Kurz that they're gonna go home together, Kurz somehow dies. This might be referred to as an example of somehow the unwillingness to leave Africa. Kurds had become so integrated in those tribes that for him, leaving Africa was like dying. And in fact, he dies. Marlowe somehow understands that he's about to die and stays with him in his last hour, waiting for something to happen. What happens is that Kurt says these two words, the horror, and then he dies. So we will never understand truly what the horror refers to. It might refer to imperialism. This is the simplest way of explaining what the horror might be. But who knows? The horror might refer to death, or to life, or to human condition. But it's better for us not to define what the horror is. It's better to leave it open to a lot of interpretations. When Marlowe goes back home, she meets Kurtz's girlfriend, who asks him about Kurtz's last days. But Marlowe somehow is jealous. He doesn't want to tell anyone what he has seen. In fact, instead of telling the truth, he says, before dying, he called your name, which was a lie. It was not true. Kurt did not mention his girlfriend's name. He died saying the horror. But what is it? It's the final lesson that Kurt delivers to all humanity, all human beings, to all of us. In that case, the final lesson he delivers to Marlowe. And Marlowe is jealous of this lesson. He doesn't want to share it with anyone else, because he had gone so far. He had gone through a lot to go, reach, and meet Kurtz and understand what Kurtz had understood. That is, all the books you read, all the literature, the philosophy you might study at school will not be so real, so true as basic humanity. What a human being basically is his inner drives, the need to survive. So probably, and that's why it's really important that we remark how educated Kurtz was. He was not ignorant. He knew philosophy. He was a poet. He had read a lot of books. He could paint. He could write poems. So how come he is fascinated by a native tribe? It sounds absurd. The top of civilization, which faces the bottom of what humanity is, rights, tribes, native tribes. And the effect is that Kurt forgets about everything he had learned, and he embraces this maybe naive but really human, true lifestyle. It may sound absurd, but it's not. On the other hand, Kipling, who was also born outside the United Kingdom, he was born in India as well, which at that time was a British colony. but he studied in Europe, in England in particular. He also went to the United States. He married an American girl. He was a journalist. Even Kipling started as a journalist. But we're gonna deal with this in the next video.